Hello and welcome to the Child Psych Podcast. I'm Tanya Johnson, registered psychologist, registered play therapist, co-founder of the Institute of Child Psychology. Today we are thrilled to have John Fogel with us. John Fogle is a husband, a father of 3 boys who are aged, are they still 8, 4, and 3?
8, almost 5 and
Very
3. He'll be
important.
5. Yeah, I don't know when your podcast episode is going to air, but maybe he'll be 5 by that time.
Okay, that's a very important detail. I know I've got a little one in my house too, and then 3.
Yeah.
And a newborn baby girl.
Well, 6 months now.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing. 4.
Yeah,
Holy
4
moly.
kids. 4 kids.
Wow. Okay. John is also a world famous parenting educator. His goal is to teach parents how to parent more effectively with less stress, sounds wonderful, and far more success. John has a wonderful Instagram. The handle is @wholeparent. He's amassed over 1.5 million followers. John does this beautiful thing with neuroscience, developmental psychology, counseling, and positive, gentle parenting wisdom, all put together in really accessible ways. John also has a really wonderful new book called Punishment-Free Parenting that we're going to be talking about today. It's really fabulous. It's so accessible. I felt like, John, honestly, when I was reading it, I felt like you were talking right to me. Yeah, it's a really great book. So welcome. So happy to have you here.
I'm happy to be here, and that's wonderful feedback about the book. That is how I wrote it in many ways to typical parents, and I wouldn't call you a typical parent with all of your credentials and your education and your background. But to hear that, even for the pros who are far better at this than I will ever be, that you also felt like it was just being written to you is fantastic. I love that.
It was wonderful, wonderful. Punishment-free parenting. Let's chat. Why did you write it? What are we doing here?
Yeah. So, the reason that I wrote Punishment-Free Parenting at its core is because I know myself to be a person who takes in most of my information from books, and especially from audiobooks. I have a reading disability. And so a lot of strategies and things to overcome that. I had to read a whole lot when I was in my master's degree program. So I did learn how to kind of power through books. But I really have this love of literature and of audiobooks. And as soon as I started gaining traction with these 1-minute videos and these kind of quick hit parenting tips on social media, I realized, you know what, you're never going to, the life change that I experienced came at the hands of listening to and reading a lot of really excellent parenting books. The one downside is that I felt like I really needed to lean hard on my academic background in order to experience fully what those books were trying to teach me. And so there was this gap for me. Not to say that other parenting books aren't accessible. I don't want to make many, throw shade at any other parenting book. I've learned so much from so many, and I've passed them along to just kind of normal parents in the trenches, and they've found a lot of good in those too. But there was this hole between where I felt like what I was able to learn and understand just as a typical person out in the world, and what developmental neuroscience, developmental psychology, play therapists like yourself, all of this stuff that had become second nature and was really par for the course, not really controversial, but was not being trickled down to the average parent. And so you go into the grocery store, you go into Walmart or wherever, you want to shop, and you walk around and you see parents who are really parenting very poorly. And it's not because they're bad people. It's because no one has told them, no one has given them any tools whatsoever to be able to effectively navigate their child's big emotions and big feelings. And I feel like those parents. I yelled at my kids this morning. Like I am still very much a work in progress. I couldn't get control of a situation, and I tried to do like the all of the stuff, and then I snapped. Because for me, it's still not fully ingrained. And so if I could just add to the lexicon, add to the conversation, and do so specifically for parents who are just normal, everyday people who are just trying to go to their job and have a positive relationship with their kid and raise healthy, grounded kids who just were able to emotionally regulate and go out into the world and have a wonderful experience of their childhood and beyond. If I could do that in any way, then I wanted to participate and contribute to that. And so that's why I wrote the book, because I think every parent deserves this information. I think it's kind of terrible how a lot of this information, even though nobody is gatekeeping it, it feels like it has been gate kept. And I think just by getting it out there, I've already seen thousands of parents come back to me and say, I've heard this stuff from other people, but I haven't heard it in this way. And I feel much more confident, or I read this other book and it was really great, but I felt kind of like a bad parent after reading it. Or, I was following your account, or I follow you and 10 other people that are all great, but I never really get to the meat and potatoes. I never get to the heart, the understanding at the base of all this stuff. And then I read your book and I left transformed. And for those people, I'm just like, man, if just one of those comments had come in, it would have been worth it to write the book, much less thousands.
Yeah, huge, 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 huge. And I think part of that is that it's empowering. The parents in the grocery store whose kid is down on the floor kicking and screaming because we've said no to the candy.
Right.
I think there's often this feeling of, I don't know what to do. And I think that's often when punishments sneak in too, because it's like, I have to control the situation as quickly as I can, but I don't have the tools to do that.
That's right. And I think that's the real truth, is that most of us, very few parents that I know, and it's not to say that it doesn't exist at all, but very few parents I know are doing what I call kind of 90s traditional bad, not ideal parenting. I shouldn't call it bad parenting, but just unthoughtful, punitive threats, that control-based parenting. They're doing that not when they're at their best. That stuff happens, like for me this morning, when I'm screaming at my kid because I can't get control of a situation, and I'm holding this 6-month-old who has just had an exploded diaper everywhere.
Of course.
And usually I want to, do the thing, and I want to go over and I want to kneel down and I want to get on their eye level, get curious and do all this stuff. But like, I'm in the living room and they're like in the playroom, and I'm trying to get control of the situation with my voice only. Well, all of a sudden, that part of me comes out and it goes, oh, the way to get the control of the situation is to become the authoritarian. And so that's what like I said, it's still a work in progress for me, but that's what I wanted to offer parents, is that, actually in this moment, and that's what my wife said to me later, in that moment, it's still more effective to do the stuff that you need to do, or that is the best way to do it. And those are the moments where we have to give ourselves a break and give ourselves some forgiveness, which, by the way, is exactly what we're advocating that we should be giving our kid. And we need to be able to do that with ourselves as well.
Yeah, which is a huge one. It's a huge, huge one that I think parents don't do very well with. John, you talk a lot about really understanding a child's brain development when it comes to kind of parenting strategies. And we just heard you have 4, so it's beautiful. You're in the thick of it right now. What is it about parents needing that knowledge, and how does it actually inform some of those practices?
Well, I think at the most basic level, you hear a lot about how the education system, whether you're in Canada or the United States where I live, needs to experience some reform. And a lot of times what people will say when they're calling for that reform is that we need more practical information. We need to teach the trades, or we need to teach how to do your taxes. Well, one of the things that I think we need to teach is just a fundamental understanding of neuroanatomy and emotional regulation. We don't, I mean, there are some people like Dr. Mark Brackett from Yale, who are trying to do a little bit of emotional intelligence training with his ruler training and things like that out in school environments. But most of us receive absolutely no substantive understanding of human emotions and how those are experienced or how those are manifest in our neuroanatomy. And so just understanding very basically that when our child is throwing that tantrum in the grocery store aisle, or when they're dysregulated at home over something that didn't go their way, or when we have to hold a boundary and we are dysregulated, that we aren't operating with the same parts of our brain as when we're calm, when we're thinking about things critically, when we're in playful environments, which is, we call play in adults flow. In children, we call it play, right? When you're working on that project, I know that you've experienced this. I've experienced this, whether it's writing or something else, and you're really enjoying what you're doing, and time just seems to just disappear. And all of a sudden it's been 2 hours and you realize that your neck hurts because you haven't moved because you're so locked in. That's play. And those are the times when we do our best learning. Those are the times when we do our best processing and moral development and all of that other stuff. The times when we're dysregulated, when we're screaming and kicking and, throwing a tantrum, whether that's an adult screaming at their kid throwing a tantrum, or their kid on the floor at the grocery store throwing a tantrum, those are the times when we're actually not learning anything. And so even if you don't take away any of the kind of anatomical language, the physiology of the brain, just simply understanding your brain does different things, and different things that your brain does better or worse at different tasks. And so when your kid is throwing a tantrum, or when your kid is just really sad or really upset, or when you are about to punish your kid, or even you just have threatened to punish your kid, those are all times when their brain and your brain are not in teaching or learning mode. They are in reactive, emotional mode. And what you have to really force yourself to do is understand that at other times during play, once your kid's well fed, after they've had a good nap, once they've connected with you again, those are the times when your child is incredibly ready to learn, when their brain is primed for learning and development. And so just that simple thing, so many parents tell me, it's so terrible to have to say the same thing to my kid 10 times. Well, you keep saying it the wrong time. That one simple switch means that you don't have to say it 10 times. You say it twice, 3 times, depending on the kid's age. If they're 2, maybe it's 5 times. But once you understand this, once you understand your child's brain, you are going to be so much of a more effective parent. And it goes beyond the tips and the tricks and knowing the scripts to say, and I just have to, do X and Y when they do A and B. You have to become more improvisational. You have to really understand what's going on. And once you do, even if you don't remember all the words for it or all the anatomy that undergirds this stuff, if you just remember, hey, I'm going to pause for 10 seconds because nothing good's going to happen in this immediate aftermath of my kid screaming or me screaming. Just that one tip alone, that's going to save you. And it's not going to save you in one case where you can apply that principle or that thing that you learned in my social media video. It's actually going to teach you and train your brain to be a more effective parent in the long term.
Oh, it's beautiful. I absolutely love that. It's this whole idea of let's wait till my brain is calmer. Let's wait till their brain is calmer. And then we can actually create change. It's not while they're down on the floor and I'm saying, I've told you a million times, give me your iPad, whatever it is.
Right. Yeah.
It's just that it's permission to step back a little bit to wait till we have those calm brains.
Well, and just understanding that it's not a defect in your child if they can't calm down, right? Even that little fact. One of the things I say in the book, one of the things that people often come back and they say, I really like this. Your kid's not giving you a hard time. They're just having a hard time. That simple fact alone, most of us were brought up in a paradigm where all of kids, less than ideal behavior, their misbehaviors, when they're causing problems, when they're attention seeking, all those things, those were identified as flaws. No, those aren't flaws. Those are just part of the journey. The same way that, the first time that you're learning something new, you're not going to be great at it. You're going to make mistakes and it's going to become more unconscious for you to do it the right way or the simple way over time. So too your kid with their emotions. They're not doing it the right way the first time. They can't. And so just understanding that one simple fact, if nothing else, gives us a lot more empathy and compassion for our kids. And when you lead with empathy and compassion, it's amazing how much easier everything is.
Yeah. And I bet, John, that helps with those triggers for parents too, because for so many parents, a trigger is my child is not listening to me, they're not being or they're not being respectful, which is all part of our own childhood stuff. But I think that recognition of just coming in with a heart-based approach and allowing permission to step back helps you to recognize your own triggers too, to go, hold on, this is a moment I need more space to breathe.
Absolutely.
Okay, so kiddos down on the floor. We're just going with the grocery store here. They're down on the floor, They're screaming, they want the candy. How do parents begin to put in some boundaries without resorting to taking away everything that the kid loves? I'm taking away this, I'm taking away that. You're not having your play dates, places that I'm sure many of us have been. But what do we do?
Right. Well, in all of those scenarios, everything that a parent is doing in that moment comes from their own survival instincts and saying, we need to, gain back control over this situation. I'm out of control. And so I have this 5-step process. It's the last 5 chapters in the book, but they're not really long chapters as you've read the book. They make up like 10% of the book, all 5 of them together, maybe 15% of the book, all 5 of the chapters together. And the book is only 13 chapters. So it's like the first 9 chapters are pretty long, or the first 8 chapters are pretty long. And then the last 5 are like real short. And the reason that I wrote the book in that way, that there's kind of like a separate part, is for this reason exactly. In those moments when we are in that survival mode, when we don't know what to do and we want to resort to all of the things, which by the way is totally normal, totally natural as a parent to want to resort to the things that and the stuff that growing up wherever you grew up is probably punitive, control-based threats, bribes, punishments, parenting. So understanding that in that moment, we have to walk through step by step how to re-engage our brain, re-engage our kids' brain, and then move forward. And so the thing that, I've been much better about this since writing the book, but just really in the last couple of years as I've been learning this stuff, the thing that triggered me with my kid this morning was that it was 2 kids fighting. And I knew that the older one wouldn't hurt the younger one. It was the 8-year-old and the 3-year-old. But I don't know that the 3-year-old won't, if he gets too overwhelmed by the situation, resort to one of his most malignantly difficult behaviors, which is biting. Or, the other day he just kind of unthoughtfully threw something at somebody and it turned out bad. Usually that doesn't turn out to be anything, but in this case, it was a Lego and it hurt somebody. So I didn't know what was going to happen. And so my first step is prevent future harm. And that was where I got stuck. I couldn't prevent future harm because my hands were full. And so I was trying to use my voice to prevent that future harm. So step one is to prevent future harm. And I should say here, we are going to get to boundaries. There's just a lot more that has to happen before that. Don't think that punishment-free parenting then automatically means boundary-free parenting or permissive parenting. That's a common misconception. In fact, when the person who wrote my foreword, Tina Payne Bryson, the author of No Drama Discipline, The Whole Brain Child, one of the things that she highlighted in the foreword, the reason for the need for a book like mine, was that too many of us have gone towards the permissive side of, if I'm not supposed to punish and I'm not supposed to yell, then I just let my kids do whatever they want. That can't be the solution, because your kid, in the same way that they're learning how to do anything in life, emotionally regulate, they're also learning how to make good pro-social decisions and good decisions in general about their own safety. So you can't always just let your kid do whatever they want. So your kid's kicking and screaming on the floor of the grocery store. Okay, what are we in an aisle with a lot of glass? Do we need to move away from the bottles of maple syrup on the wall that are about to come crashing down? Is my kid throwing a fit in the liquor aisle? Like we have to make some choices here about, sometimes you got to pick your kid up and carry him to a safer location. So step one is just make sure that we're going to prevent future harm. Then step two, and this is where I kind of get, or step 1A or step 1B, this is where I get into those latter 5 chapters. We're going to consider what's going on in our brain. We're going to consider what's going on in our kid's brain. We're going to lead with empathy. That's step 2, right? If the first one is just kind of assessing the situation, making sure there's no future harm, what's going on in them, what's going on in me. Step 2 is we got to validate. We got to honor what's going on with them. A lot of people think if I tell my kid it's okay that they're having a tantrum, then that's encouraging them to have a tantrum. Nope. It's simply stating that you see that they are having a tantrum. Hey, I see what's going on. This is the problem with ignoring behaviors. This is one of the classic authoritarian methods. Well, if I can't hit my kid, I'm just going to ignore them. Something that happened, in the early 2000s, late 90s. That was like a big parenting movement. Just ignore the tantrum. Whatever you ignore is just going to keep going until they feel heard and validated. And if it doesn't keep going, it's because they've repressed it. So number 2, we're going to validate whatever's going on. Number 3, we're going to outline the boundary of what's going, hey, we need to outline, here's what we can't do. We can't just get whatever we want all the time. We can't just grab the syrup down from the rack and all of it fall down, whatever, right? We're going to outline, this is what we need to do. And that's where, if there's something that's happened in the midst of this, where something's gotten broken or there's been a mess made or somebody's been hurt, we might, as part of that boundary, also say, and here's what we got to do to make right what we've already, the mess that we've already made. Not always that essential in that moment, because sometimes we've avoided the harm. That's the ideal. Not always, though. Sometimes mistakes happen and we have to correct those mistakes. And even if you don't fix that in that moment, for example, a week ago, my kid was at a place where he ripped down all these signs that he just wasn't thinking. He's 8, and these signs were new, and he had asked me, I run the place, and he had asked me, like, what are these? And I said, I don't really know. Somebody else did that. And so he took that as license. I'm just going to rip them all down. We had to go back and clean them up. That's not the time in that moment. I'm kicking and screaming on the floor or whatever, when they've just done the thing to say, now we're going to go do this right now. It was more like, we're going to have to fix this, but that's not going to be right now. We'll come back tomorrow and do that, or whenever, in an hour. Then that's where we get into, like, once we've done this, we've considered the situation, we've validated for them, we've outlined whatever boundaries, consequences need to exist. Then at that point is where we start to do some of the brain-based practices, grounding exercises, deep breathing, that stuff. It's all what I call the leading. So we move kids, limbic resonance, matching their energy, moving them out of the tantrum. And then last, and this is the most important piece, and I think that if there was one part of the book that I don't get enough feedback of people saying this was really important, I think it's the most important part of the book. It serves me right for putting it at the very end of the book as the last chapter that nobody remembers. That I kind of was hoping that people would read the whole book and they would be left with this. In reality, most people don't finish the books that they read. I probably should have put it at the beginning. But the last step in my kind of 5-step method of moving through any of these big emotion situations is to empower for the future. So to come back an hour, 2 hours later and go, hey, so we were walking through the grocery store. You saw that cereal up on the shelf. You started screaming. You threw yourself on the floor. How should I handle that situation in the future if we can't get cereal? What do you need? What should we have done differently? Should I have told you ahead of time that we weren't going to get it? How could you have approached that situation differently? And this is where a lot of parents have to resist the urge to just immediately go to, well, if you hadn't screamed and kicked and thrown your body on the ground, then I probably would have considered it. But now that that's punitive. You're making them go into the back and you're going, hey, under the guise of learning what we can do, you've actually just turned this into a lecture. You've weaponized your processing. Instead, you can say something to the effect of, the easiest way for me to make a good decision about whether we should get something is if you just tell me and you explain it to me. And a lot of parents right now are going, my kid's 2, they can't do all of this. And the answer to them is, okay, first of all, kid's not going to be 2 forever. A lot of this stuff is going to hit you a year from now, 2 years from now. It's going to become really, really essential. But just because your kid can't be as involved in the process doesn't mean that they don't want that modeled. So even with now he's 3, but he was 2 not very long ago. Even with my Liam when he was 2, sitting down with him and saying, oh, let's talk about what happened an hour ago. This is what I was feeling. It seems like this is what you were feeling. And it's much more of a monologue than a dialogue. But just practicing that, now it's amazing how an hour later, he'll start that process with me. Something happens an hour, before when this happened. And what's actually most amazing, if I might just take one more moment here, is that, and I don't want to make too big of a deal about this. It was actually not a great parenting moment for me a little bit ago. Well, it was about 2 or 3 days ago. My kids have next door neighbor kids they play with every single day, basically. They've become kind of a part of our family in a way of like playing. Their parents are very different than me. In some ways, very similar. In some ways, they're from the opposite side of the world. They're from Jordan. So there's stuff that's also just not remotely the same. And I came upon a situation where it seemed like there's some kids and they were kind of getting into it with each other, a little bit of name calling, but usually I would just ignore this situation because they're working it out. And if they want to come and talk to me about it, then I'm happy to do that. But it was not going to get violent or anything. It was just, I didn't like when you did this. Well, I didn't like when you did that, and I didn't do anything. I just walked through and they tried to rope me in as the judge, hey, what do you think about this? Matt's dad. And I just kind of said, you guys will work it out. And then I went inside. I was holding my baby. And he came back to me like an hour later. He knocked on the door to our house. He said, is Matt's dad here? And my wife opened the door. She said, yeah, he's right here. And he came to me and he said, I didn't like that you didn't stand up for me because I felt like I was being bullied and I felt like you needed to do something. So even with totally kids outside of your life, if you do this and if you practice this well, he was processing emotionally the difficult thing that he did, that he went through. And I was just totally unaware of it. And I didn't actually respond very well in that moment. I was just kind of like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, that's not it. But then 5 minutes later, I go, oh my gosh, he's trying to empower for the future. Like he's out here trying to learn. What should I have done in this situation? And so I went over to his house and I said, hey, I'm sorry that I wasn't there for you.
Oh, beautiful.
And but that's that really most important piece, to be honest, is after the dust settles. And this is where parents get it wrong. They think my kid's screaming on the floor. The most important thing is what happens in the next 30 seconds while they're screaming and kicking on the floor. Actually, that's the least important thing. If you pick your kid up bodily and put them in the cart and walk them out of the store, like it's not the end of the world. If you let them scream and kick on the floor, it's not the end of the world. Like what parents do in that moment, as long as they're not getting violent with their kids, like I could care less. It's what you do an hour from then that makes you an amazing parent. And that actually, for most people, they're like, I can never think of what to do in that moment. I can never think of what to say. I can never think of the script. I can never think of this. I can never remember your advice. And I'm just like, yeah, but that's actually not when the best stuff happens. The best stuff happens later. So just focus on that. And so I think that's, I'm sorry to kind of monopolize our moment, but I think that really, in the groceries, for example, there's a lot of stuff we can do. And there's hacks galore in the book of, you can do this, you can play this color game, and you can, kind of hijack their brain and get them back regulated, whatever. That stuff doesn't really matter in the long term. What matters is, how do we handle this in the car on the way home? And that is where you're going to do your best parenting work. And it's where you're going to make yourself a lot, when I say parent with less stress and more success, that's where you're going to do that work to parent with less stress and more success. It's always stressful in that moment, but you can do stuff that can make that situation so much less infrequent, or so much more infrequent, where at that point, you're just not seeing this type of dysregulation. And my kids, in some ways, are the worst behaved kids in public, because they're not just going to fall immediately in line. In other ways, if I say the thing that I need to say, my kids will have way more ability for impulse control, because they know, hey, we're gonna fall in here.
Yeah. John, I think what I just love about that is I think when we rely on kind of the more traditional disciplinary techniques, we lose so many beautiful opportunities for emotion regulation. And to me, that's everything we're speaking about here. It's empathy, it's love, it's regulation. And that's that example that you just spoke about. The little boy comes to speak to you, you go speak to him. Such beautiful learning that would never happen if we came in really hard with all of these consequences.
Right.
There's no space to learn.
Exactly. And there's no, what we're modeling in that moment is you are untrustworthy with your own emotions and I have to control the situation. Instead of what we're modeling is, hey, together we can make it through this difficult process of having a developing brain. And everybody makes mistakes along that process. I know of no perfect parents, but the best parents I know are the ones who acknowledge when they've made a mistake and they try to apologize for it.
John, I think we could talk forever about this. There's so much here. Any final words for everybody listening in?
Yeah, absolutely. The number one, if you are considering getting the book, and this has been by far the top feedback that I've gotten, if you're considering getting the book, but you're afraid that this book is going to make you feel like I'm not a good parent or I'm not good enough, the book is written specifically to dissuade you of the idea that you're not a good parent. I think just simply by buying the book and opening it and reading one page, you've done more than the overwhelming majority of parents will ever do, in that you've considered that maybe you should do things differently. And so I think each and every one of you, just by listening to this episode of the podcast, even if you never get the book, just by listening to this episode of the podcast, to listening to other stuff that is coming out of these platforms, you are already amazing parents. You don't actually need as much help as you think that you need. You may just need a little bit of advice, a little bit of encouragement, but you're already amazing parents. And then the second thing is that really, I think a lot of us have to move out of this idea of parenting from a place of just immediate needs. We got to start thinking long term. Our kids are growing up into a very different world than we all grew up in. The teen mental health crisis has never been as bad as it is right now. And all of that stuff means that we're going to have to choose to make some different choices. We're going to have to make different decisions for our kids. And in order to do that, we have to be equipped to do that. So if you want to start parenting with the end in mind, parenting more effectively, I hope that you'll consider getting my book. But even if you don't, I already think that you're an amazing parent.
Fabulous. And we'll link it in the description below. John, for everybody who wants to find you, where can they do that?
At Whole Parent on all of the social medias. That's WHOLE, not HOLE. WHOLE Parent, PARENT. And then my website is wholeparentacademy.com. If you know the person who has wholeparent.com, please let me know. I'd be willing to have a conversation with them, but my website is wholeparentacademy.com.
I love it. Thank you so much, John.
Thank you.